The Convenience Store by the Sea by Sonoko Machida. Translated by Bruno Navasky. Chapter 2. The Convenience Store Coffee of Hope. Yoshiro Kiriyama was 80% egg sandwiches and coffee. To be precise, special fluffy egg sandwiches and premium coffee. Both were popular offerings at the Tenderness convenience store chain. Yoshiro worked at a Juku, an after-school test prep academy. It was in Nozomigaoka, to the southwest, so he took the train, but before heading out, he always stopped for a late lunch at Tenderness. He bought the same thing every time and at the same branch. The Golden Villa Tenderness in Majiko, about halfway down Osakamachi Avenue. It was a little out of the way from Yoshiro's rooms at the Sea Breeze Villa Apartments, but he was a regular customer there. It was just past 1:30 p.m., and the lunchtime rush had begun to subside. The automatic doors slid smoothly open, and Yoshiro heard the familiar melody play as he stepped inside. His whole body relaxed as the cool air flowed over his sweaty skin. The theme song of a recent TV drama played quietly in the background, and Yoshiro went straight to the refrigerated foods section. There were rice balls, pasta, and a wide assortment of other foods in the case, but without hesitation, he picked up an egg sandwich and examined the color of the eggs and bread. Yes, good again today, as always. He selected a 2-pack of sandwiches and headed to the register. The clerk was waiting there, a regular-sized coffee cup already in her hand. He'd seen her before, a woman in her 30s with a name tag that read Nakao. Nakao took the sandwiches and entered the items on the register with a practiced hand. Watching her calm face, Yoshiro wondered idly what she thought of him. By chance, he had turned on the TV the previous day, and they were talking about how store clerks would give nicknames to customers who made a strong impression on them. Like Red Tea for the one who always wears the same t-shirt, or number 39 for the one who never says anything except the number of the cigarette pack he wants from the rack behind the counter. They might have a name for me, he thought. Whenever I'm here, I get the egg sandwich and coffee. Something like breakfast combo? Or maybe something simpler like specs. Yoshiro paid the bill, and Nakao put the sandwich in a bag and handed it to him, along with the empty coffee cup. Usually at this point she would say, "Thank you very much," but today, instead, she cleared her throat and said, "Excuse me." "Yes? What is it?" There was no way she could have known what he was thinking, but he was a little embarrassed anyway for some reason, and his voice cracked slightly as he spoke. Nakao flashed him a gentle smile and handed him a sheet of paper. "We're getting new coffee machines next week. This is the announcement flyer." Yoshiro looked at the paper. His eyes widened. You know them, don't you?" Nakao said happily. "Sachika Coffee is supervising the whole operation." "Isn't that amazing?" "But wow." Sachika Coffee was a hidden gem in Hakata, a bustling district in Fukuoka, on Kyushu's northwest coast. Every serious coffee lover knew it. The proprietor was a coffee master, having received extensive training at the well-known Caffè Greco in Italy, and he was particular about his brew. He purchased the beans at their place of origin, roasted them locally on site, and produced a special blend that was strong on the palate with a spicy finish. The trend lately was towards fresh, acidic coffees with fruity notes, but Sachika Coffee continued to offer the more traditional dark roast, and discerning customers would travel from far and wide just to enjoy their brew. Yoshiro, too, held strong opinions about coffee. In a crowded field, Sachika Coffee's premium blend made for a superior cup. He thought there was nothing in the world quite as wonderful as time spent eating a warm egg sandwich with a cup of Sachika Coffee premium blend in the old shop, a wonderfully preserved relic of the early 20th century in the Showa modern style. He continued, "That's a real shock. You got approval from the master himself." In the center of the flyer, he recognized the stern, venerable face of the old coffee master. The man was said to take great pride in the Sachika coffee name. He had received a number of offers from companies who wanted to mass market his products, but he had never before agreed to such a thing. "I just can't believe it. How in the world did it happen?" It seems Nisiko persuaded him somehow. That's our counselor," Nakao said in a meaningful tone, stifling a giggle. Nakao usually handled customers calmly, in a manner befitting her age, but now and again her girlish side would emerge. Catching a glimpse of the innocent-seeming smile, Yoshiro let out a noise of surprise. "They make really great coffee, don't they?" Nakao said. "I'm looking forward to this myself. They're famous." "But why?" Abruptly, Yoshiro thrust the flyer back at her. "Oh," Nakao said, eyes widening in surprise, and Yoshiro began to speak at rapid-fire speed. "Look, it's just that the master there makes delicate changes every day to the roast and the brewing time. Folks who don't appreciate the depth of flavor say it's too bitter, or whatever, but it's not like he's just steeping a dark roast for a long time. It's a subtle process. If they tried to get a machine to serve something like that, his longtime fans would be up in arms. People would say Sachika Coffee had sold out. Why would he choose to do something like that? That affects the reputation of such a prestigious store. I'm a fan myself, you know, and I think it's a real shame." Nakao's round eyes blinked rapidly. Seeing her confusion, Yoshiro came to his senses and ceased his monologue. Rubbing his head with a little embarrassment, he offered an awkward apology. Sorry about that. It's just, maybe I like it too much? So I got kind of worked up." No, don't worry about it. It's that kind of a place, isn't it?" Nakao's kind face shifted to a placating smile as she added brightly, "But I'm sure our version will taste great, so please give it a try when it becomes available." In the face of her unfalteringly professional attitude, Yoshiro became embarrassed. He had let his emotions get the better of him. "Sorry," he croaked weakly one more time, then left the register and proceeded to the coffee station. He set the cup in its place and waited for the machine to do its work. A little song played to let him know when the coffee was ready. He was about to reach for a plastic lid from the shelf nearby when someone pressed one into his hand. He turned in surprise, and there, holding the lid, was a man with a smooth look, standing a little too close to Yoshiro and peering into his eyes. "Oh, what? Good afternoon, Mr. Kiriyama. Going to work, I see." A honeyed voice, then a gleam of white teeth. A small mole at the corner of his right eye was hidden from view by laugh lines. Yoshiro responded yes, well, his voice a little too high. Yoshiro had never met a movie star or male idol in person, but he thought they must all be creatures like Shiba, descendants of the same tribe, wielding some kind of special powers. Mr. Kiriyama? Is something wrong? Again, his face moved a little nearer and Yoshiro's heart started to race. No need to get so close. He tried to reply coolly, not wanting to let Shiba know the effect he was having, but in the end, he just stammered. No, nothing, that's good. Here, take the coffee lid. Not wanting to talk anymore, Yoshiro nodded, took the lid, and carefully fitted it atop the steaming cup. He came face to face with Shiba nearly every day, but he never really got used to it. With an easy motion, Shiba took a duster to the counter next to him. Well, time to go. Yes, thank you. Come back soon. Shiba saw him off with an easy smile, and Yoshiro moved to the dine-in space, which had a door separating it from the store. There were spaces like this in some of the other stores, but this one was always comfortable and carefully maintained. He entered the room. A woman who looked like a cleaner was mopping the floor in a flowered apron. She smiled at Yoshiro. She bore a slight resemblance to his mother who lived in Oita, on the southeast coast where he grew up. The woman must have been done with her cleaning because she quickly put away the mop and exited through a door leading back into the building. The room was now empty and Yoshiro perched on a seat at the end of the counter. The countertop was perfectly clean, not even a drop of water on it. He deposited his messenger bag on a stool and brought the food bag over to the toaster. He took out one of the sandwiches and toasted it. 50 seconds at 1000 watts. After toasting the sandwich to a light golden brown, Yoshiro returned to his seat with it cradled in his hand. He sank his teeth into the sandwich. His mouth filled with the fragrant bread, crisp on the outside, fluffy on the inside, and the warm egg salad. It was delicious again today, as always. The bread had a delicate sweetness and the nutty scent of wheat. The mild egg, with just the right amount of salt and a hint of mustard tickling his nose, was a perfect match. Yoshiro made quick work of the two halves of the first sandwich and was about to reach for the coffee when he paused for a moment. I suppose it's true, isn't it? He said quietly to himself. This sandwich would pair really well with Sachika coffee. The egg sandwich at Tenderness was somewhat similar to the hot egg sandwich at Sachika coffee. If you toasted it, they became even more alike. The premium coffee at Tenderness complemented their egg sandwich naturally, but nearly every day Yoshiro thought about how much deeper and richer the flavors would be if it were Sachika Coffee's special blend. He wondered if the company had also caught the eye of this Mitsuhiko because of this egg sandwich. Not a chance. Yoshiro gave a dismissive laugh. But in some part of his heart he couldn't help but believe it. Mitsuhiko's taste in coffee had to be very similar to his own. Lifting the cup to his mouth, Yoshiro thought back to the day he had first tasted the coffee at Tenderness and how the flavor had surprised him. There had been coffee machines in convenience stores for quite some time now, but Tenderness introduced them about 3 years later than most. When the long-awaited debut arrived and Yoshiro finally tasted the coffee, it made him just a little bit happy. The rich flavor and aroma of the carefully roasted beans suited him well, and at long last the convenience store had reached the point where it could offer this kind of quality at an affordable price. The thought of it was surprisingly moving. After that, he started buying coffee at various Tenderness stores almost every day, but one time he happened to stop by one particular branch of the chain, and the coffee there, although broadly similar to the Tenderness coffee he had been drinking up until then, had some definite differences. A rich, clear flavor, as if you were drinking something a step up in quality. He was surprised enough to ask the clerk, "Did Tenderness get different beans?" In reply, the clerk beamed. Now that he thought about it, it was Nakao back then, too, and asked, "Is this your first time visiting this branch, sir? You must have noticed the flavor. But the beans are the same. They're the premium coffee beans in exclusive use at all the branches." But then, what about the taste? Yoshiro had pursued the issue. Nakao's eyes crinkled happily. Then she whispered, as if she were letting him in on a great secret. "Actually, at our store we pick over the beans. We're the only ones that do it." Huh. He made a noise of surprise. Picking was the process of sorting the beans by hand, removing the ones that were broken, insect damaged, or irregular in size. This eliminated odd flavors and odors, significantly improving the taste of the coffee. However, considering the daily volume of coffee sales at the convenience store, it seemed like a ridiculous amount of effort. "Really, you do that?" he asked. "It's delicious, isn't it?" Nakao responded. "We do it every night. We also use a sieve and sort them by size. It makes a surprising difference in the taste, doesn't it?" She added, "But I don't do it myself. It's our store manager." Could there really be a store manager who cared enough to take on such an exhausting task? Yoshiro was moved in a way that reminded him of the day when he had tasted Sachika Coffee's original blend for the first time. Imagine, there were actually people out there who loved coffee the way he did. But when Nakao actually pointed out the manager, Yoshiro couldn't believe his eyes. There was this man, giving off a sort of pink aura, surrounded by elderly women. The women were all at least 70 years old, or maybe even older than that, and were besieging the man with expressions no different from what Yoshiro would see on the faces of the girls he taught at the Juku. "Oh, Yoshiko, did you switch to a new lipstick? It looks lovely." The man spoke with a captivating smile, strangely reminiscent of a blooming rose. "Yes." A woman, Yoshiko, presumably, let out a half-whisper that was closer to a silent shriek. Then all the ladies around her began to clamor in loud, giddy voices completely incompatible with their years. Yoshiro simply couldn't believe the scene before him. Was this some sort of ladies' night out on the town? Yoshiro rubbed his eyes and looked twice, but it was definitely a Tenderness shop, and the man was wearing the same Tenderness uniform as Nakao. Are they shooting a movie or something?" "Nope, just a normal day for this store." Nakao spoke calmly. Yoshiro was confused. This scene, the mobbing of a teen idol on tour, normal? And what's more, the man in the center of it all was the manager of a convenience store. It's kind of hard to explain, so maybe let's rewind the conversation back to coffee. Okay, let's just pretend I didn't see that. Ah, yes. Well, why bother yourself over this nonsense? he asked. Nakao let loose as if she couldn't wait any longer. Ah, sorry. We followed an advisor's recommendation. Seems Chairman Horanuchi of the Tenderness stores calls him his counselor. Counselor Nisiko. Tatsuhige Horanuchi was well known in Kyushu. His small local market had grown into an extensive chain of convenience stores throughout the island. He was an energetic older man who was noted for appearing in the company's TV ads. Caring for people, caring for you. Tenderness. Yoshiro could picture his familiar figure, his powerful voice pronouncing the company's slogan. Counselor Nisiko said we should do it. That since we went through all the trouble to get good beans, we should take the time to pick them over. So we're trying it out here. Yoshiro took another sip. Was it a ludicrous amount of time and effort? No, when he tasted the difference, any doubts melted away. Yoshiro breathed a sigh of agreement, but Nakao frowned slightly. The problem is, if all the stores do the work we're doing, they won't be able to make ends meet. And then we would no longer be able to price it at 150 yen. So it seems like the best path going forward is to focus on having the beans picked at the plant, right after they roast them, instead of at the stores. A few months later, the coffee began to taste better at all the Tenderness stores, just as Nakao had predicted. But Shiba never stopped picking and sorting the beans himself, so the coffee at his branch was still special, head and shoulders above the rest. Yoshiro was so impressed by the taste of the coffee that he added a visit to the shop to his daily commute. Sometimes he'd talk with Nakao and Shiba. Along the way, Nakao eventually explained that the mysterious Nisiko was not an employee of the chain, but rather just an enthusiastic customer. Chairman Horanuchi set up a P.O. box because he wanted to hear from customers directly. Messages go straight to him without anyone interfering. This Nisiko writes to him all the time and has a lot to say. She explained that Nisiko had acquired the title of counselor largely due to the suggestion that the store carry baby food. Nakao, whose son was now in high school, folded her arms at this point in the story and said in a serious voice, "Baby food isn't easy. It's really hard to make something that you can feed a baby," she continued. "My husband was always quite the chef, but when it came to baby food, he said himself that he was at his wit's end. There were all sorts of problems. We needed to use sterilized jars, but we kept running out. Well, anyway, we heard that Nisiko wrote to the chairman and said she wanted him to sell baby food at the store. You should provide food for babies, too," said the letter. It went straight to the chairman, and he responded. He created a baby corner in each of the Tenderness stores, stocked with powdered milk, nappies, and baby food in sterilized jars. What's more, he began to stock special bento lunches, mildly seasoned with soft textures. These were for younger children and the elderly as well. So the original impetus for the Tenderness chain's goal, to become a convenience store that cared for people, came from one customer's letter. In the wake of this, the chairman began to really look forward to Nisiko's letters. "Wow, Nisiko, huh?" Yoshiro murmured, fiddling with his cup. So this Nisiko person was the reason Yoshiro was making his daily detour to the Golden Villa branch. He had no idea what sort of person Nisiko was. Shiba had once let slip in passing that Yoshiro and Nisiko were about the same age, but other than that, he hadn't a clue. Nisiko was no older than Yoshiro, but had the power to move an entire convenience store chain. And now the stubborn master of a coffee shop as well. So Nisiko was surely not only a person of common sense, but also one of energy and influence. Who was it? He really hoped they could meet somehow. Yoshiro felt sure Nisiko would be able to size him up accurately, help him take stock of his life, and advise him on what was lacking. There was so much he needed to grow and improve, and Nisiko could offer advice to him just as well as to Tenderness. Or was that all just wishful thinking? With a wry smile, he stood and took his remaining sandwich pack over to the toaster. Toasting it just as before, he returned to his seat. Downing his warm coffee between bites of sandwich, he gazed out the window. The sharp early afternoon sunlight heated the asphalt on the street outside. Hot air rose shimmering from the ground, while the cars above spewed exhaust fumes as they passed. There were few pedestrians. A woman passed quickly by, carrying a small parasol that seemed of little comfort in the bright sun. The weather will cool down after the Obon festival in August, Yoshiro told himself, but even now, with September just round the corner, the hot summer days continued. There were daily reports of people collapsing from heat stroke. People were talking about it all over. The weather's extreme this year. Well above average. A real heat wave. But to Yoshiro, the scene seemed no different from the year before. Not the view out the window, the coffee in his hand, the color of his sandwich. And he himself was the same. After his meal, he'd get on the train, go to work, prepare his evening lecture, and talk to middle school students about how to write the perfect short essay, just as he had done many dozens of times before. In the evening, he'd grab a perfunctory diner meal for dinner, or head home with whatever was on sale at the supermarket. Today, 1 year ago, he was exactly the same. Would he be here a year from now, too, staring out the window at the same scene? He didn't like it, but he didn't know what to do about it either. Yoshiro watched as a young man in a tank top dashed into the store. He was wearing a baseball cap and his face underneath was flushed bright red. Then a mini truck rolled into the car park. He had seen it a few times before. He thought it was probably from some sort of junk collection company. A washing machine and some steel oil drums were loaded in the back. A bearded man climbed out of the driver's seat. He wore a light green coverall with the sleeves rolled high and the words, "Whatever Guy," written in white letters on his back. Whenever he saw it, Yoshiro thought about what a strange name it was for a company. The man glanced up at the blazing sky, then disappeared into Tenderness with an easy stride. The side door from the store opened and the young man he had been watching earlier entered the dine-in space. He sat at the opposite end of the counter from Yoshiro and reached into his plastic bag. He took out a fizzy drink and the latest issue of a weekly manga magazine for boys. He ran his hand happily across the cover, which featured the main character brandishing a sword. Yoshiro recognized the series. It had been made into an animated film the previous year. He quietly examined the young man. The kid must be a real fan, too, he thought. After devoting a sufficient amount of time to the magazine cover, the boy turned the page. Ignoring the sweat running down his temples, he started to read, and in no time he was lost in the world of the manga. Contentment spread across his face. By force of habit, Yoshiro reached for the sketchbook that he kept stowed away at the bottom of his messenger bag. Then he caught a faint scent of curry. He looked around. The bearded man from before had entered the dine-in space. The man looked around the room and, with a grunt and a nod, sat down right next to Yoshiro. There were plenty of seats at the empty tables behind them, thought Yoshiro, so why'd you have to sit next to me? He shot an accusatory glare at the man, but the man paid it no mind and reached into one of the bags he was holding. With a gesture that radiated pleasure, he pulled out a black curry with Wagyu beef and a small pack of red Fukujinzuke pickled vegetables. From a second bag, he pulled a 1-liter bottle of sparkling water. He took about half of the pickles, heaping them alongside the steaming curry sauce. He gave a long, satisfied look at the way the bright red of the pickles stood out against the velvety black curry, and then slowly, taking time to savor the food, the man began to eat. Either he was very hungry, or else he just really liked curry. Periodically, he would close his eyes and give a heartfelt nod. He ate the pickles straight and then tried them mixed together with the sauce. The man ate continuously, admiring each subtle variation, one by one. The whole experience looked so delicious that Yoshiro couldn't help but stare. Yoshiro ate egg sandwiches just about every day. It made him happy, but as he watched the man, it occurred to him that a little curry once in a while might be nice, too. The dark black roux, which had never held the slightest interest for him, and the bright red pickles, they were too bright, really, were stirring his appetite in an unexpectedly powerful way. The man ate the curry with gusto from start to finish, then cleared his throat happily and drank some of the water. Then he put his hand back in his bag and drew out one of Yoshiro's favorite egg sandwiches. The man peeled back the plastic and took out the sandwich, and then, deliberately, as if he were analyzing it, he also peeled apart the 2 slices of bread. What? Thought Yoshiro, but before he could react, the man had scattered the leftover pickles from the curry on top of the creamy egg filling of the open sandwich. Looking at the vivid contrast between the intensely red pickles on that background of pastel yellow, Yoshiro said, "Whoa," out loud. What was this guy doing? As if noticing his existence for the first time, the man turned towards Yoshiro. The man looked first at Yoshiro's bemused face and then down at the contents of his own hands, and the corners of his mouth lifted into a grin. The face beneath the well-tanned skin and long beard was unexpectedly youthful. With an innocent smile, he asked, "Any food allergies?" "Huh? No, but..." "Okay, then give that here." The man pointed to the half-eaten sandwich, still in Yoshiro's hand. Almost against his will, he held it out and the man said quickly, "Open it, open it." Under pressure with no time to think, Yoshiro pulled apart his sandwich into 2 pieces, and the man just as quickly scattered some of the pickles inside. "Ugh," Yoshiro groaned. "Eat," the man said simply. "Try it. It's good." The man reassembled his own sandwich with expert precision and took a big bite. Yoshiro could hear the crunch of the pickles as he chewed. Watching the smile lines gathering in the corners of the man's eyes as he enjoyed his food, Yoshiro put his own disassembled sandwich back together. After some hesitation, he bit into it nervously. "Well?" asked the man. "It's good, isn't it?" Slowly Yoshiro nodded at the man, who now had a little egg in his beard. Gradually a smile dawned on his face. The combination was surprisingly good. It was sweet and sour with an appealing texture. He had never for a moment considered having it this way, but somehow he also felt like he had tasted it sometime before. What was it? Then he remembered. It was the special tartare sauce that his mother would always make for him at home. It was like that, with minced pickled radish or something in it. Pickled wasabi isn't bad either, but these are good for color, don't you think? The man finished his sandwich and drank down the rest of his water in a great gulp. Draining the liter bottle easily, he gave a deep sigh of satisfaction. He cleared up his rubbish, said, "Well, gotta go," and took his leave. But then he suddenly turned back to Yoshiro. "I get it." Yoshiro stared at the man and shook his head in confusion, not understanding what he meant. The man raised his voice. "You toast the egg sandwich." "I get it." And this time he left for good, whatever guy gleaming in the sunlight as the man disappeared into his truck. The vehicle pulled slowly out of the car park and was lost in the flow of traffic along the roadway. Yoshiro watched him go, dumbfounded by this strangely vigorous mystery man. Then he took another bite of the half-forgotten sandwich he was still holding in his hand and gave a little laugh. "He's right. It's pretty interesting," he said. "Maybe it goes well with curry too." The aroma of curry lingering in the room complemented the egg sandwich well. Next time, he thought, he'd try the man's combo himself. After his strangely satisfying meal was complete, Yoshiro looked at his watch and saw that it was almost time for his train. He hopped out of his seat and left in a hurry. How many people in the world find their dream job? We ask middle school students to talk about their dreams for the future, but how many of them actually make those dreams come true? Work was over, and the second-to-last train of the day was nearly empty. Yoshiro slumped in his seat, staring vacantly at his own reflection in the glass of the window across from him. Exhaustion showed on his drained face, and his skin was oily with sweat. "Have I become an old man already at 33? He wondered. By this point in his life, he should have made great progress along the road towards fulfillment of his dreams. But the ideal self that he had pictured so many times in his young head was nowhere to be found. In the window reflection, he suddenly saw an image of himself as a boy. He had been an unexceptional child. In every activity you cared to name, whether it was athletic or academic, his performance had always been unremarkable. He had an unassuming personality, with nothing to distinguish him throughout his school years. So he lacked confidence, and his catchphrase became me? I don't know. But there was one thing that he was truly proud of, one dream that he believed would definitely come true. He wanted to become a manga illustrator, drawing comic books. He had nurtured his dream since he was just a kid in 4th grade. Someday the world will be spellbound by my manga. He had won a few prizes for his artwork, and for as long as he could remember, wanted nothing but to sit in front of a sheet of drawing paper. It was his clear purpose in life, There was nothing else. More important than being selected for the track team or coming first in his class, it was the thing that allowed him to be himself. But his dreams hadn't come true, not at all. Instead, he graduated from an ordinary high school, attended a run-of-the-mill college, and ended up working as a test prep instructor at the Juku. Even that job was just something he fell into. Someone had recommended him, and he was hired. No more than that. Still, he didn't intend to stay there forever. He continued to pursue his dream while he worked, and if he succeeded, he would quit without hesitation. Or that's what he told himself. Maybe I shouldn't have been so half-hearted about it. Professor Kiriyama, why did you take this job? The words from about a half hour ago echoed in his mind. His lecture was over, and he was seeing off his students, who were heading home as always. Yoshiro called out his farewells from behind as they climbed into shuttle buses and family cars, when several of the girls in his class approached and surrounded him. They exchanged glances among themselves, some of them smirking, and eventually one of them seemed to gather her courage and addressed him. This class is no fun at all, and you're not even trying. It feels like you're just here for the paycheck. Yoshiro understood what she was saying, and yet, at the same time, the words didn't sink in. The smile froze on his face. Looking at him, the girl continued. I wouldn't want to live like that, no matter what. The girls around her burst into laughter. Seeing their sincerely happy but somehow unpleasant smiles, he felt a chill running from the top of his head down to the tip of his toes. Yoshiro scratched his head and somehow managed an audible chuckle. Is that so? He asked. Sorry about that. I'll try to be a little more careful in the future. Looking a little uncomfortable, the girls dispersed to go home. He smiled at their backs as they left, but his legs were trembling. Yoshiro had always intended to do his best at the test prep job, but he had only ever meant it to be a temporary position, and it was hard for him to take working with the children seriously. In the end, the students saw right through him. Yoshiro took his phone from his pocket. Today, they had announced the second round of cuts in a large manga competition. He called up the list of finalists, but his pen name wasn't on it. How many times now had he failed to make the shortlist? Maybe everything that had happened recently was a sign that enough was enough. It was time to let go of his dreams. Actually, past time, so maybe it was a warning. Yoshiro put away his phone with a sigh. A middle-aged man who turned his back on reality to chase dreams that will never come true. A hopeless husk with nothing to show for his name. He hated to admit it, but that was who he was now. It was just too pitiful. He was seized by a sudden impulse to pull the sketchbook from his bag and tear it to shreds, but another voice inside him called out to stop. He froze, hand halfway into the bag, unable to move an inch either way. At Mijiko Station, a crowd of students in uniform and women in business clothes with tired faces, presumably on their way home from work, streamed out of the train. Yoshiro exited a little behind them and walked sluggishly down the platform. At the ticket gate, he glanced backwards. The front of the train was directly behind him, its flattened red and black face staring right back at him. Mijiko Station was the first stop on the Kagoshima Main Line, which ran from Kitakyushu in the north all the way down to the city of Kagoshima on the southern tip of the island. Since it was the starting point, the tracks ended right in the station. Yoshiro didn't know all that much about trains, but there weren't a lot of places where one could get a good look at the front of the trains up close like that. Actually, the scene was quite popular with tourists, who would often take photos from just outside the gate. When he first moved to the area for work, Yoshiro, too, was surprised by the sight and found it fascinating. When he stood at the beginning of the tracks, he felt a surge of happiness at the thought that his personal potential could run on forever from there. But now it only seemed like the end of the line. Just as Majiko Station was both the starting point and the terminus for this train, Yoshiro's possibilities were not stretching off endlessly, but instead gasping their dying breath. He would just keep on doing the same thing, one day after the next. It was departure time. The bell rang and the red and black face receded into the distance. Yoshiro shook his head once, then left the station. Summer's lukewarm evening breeze touched his cheeks. He could smell the salt from the ocean. On the streets, teeming with tourists during the daytime, scarcely a soul could now be seen. He bought a can of beer at a convenience store by the station and made his way towards the seaside across from his home. The Majiko Station House was built in 1914 during Japan's Taisho era and featured an unusual neo-Renaissance design. It was a National Historic Landmark with a distinct retro feel, and the area around the station house was dotted with a number of old buildings from the late 19th century to the pre-war period. The buildings, including the station house, were lit up as they usually were at night, but due to the late hour, all was still. It was as if they were holding their breath. Yoshiro opened his beer and nursed it, sip by sip, as he headed down to the waterfront. He passed by a few couples gazing out at the night ocean. He grimaced at the beer. He wasn't much of a drinker, and looked up at the sky. The stars were twinkling, and he could hear the sound of the waves rolling gently in. He stopped and cast his gaze out over the sea. Across the channel, he could see the city lights of Shimonoseki. Shortly after he had arrived in Majiko, he'd taken a ride there on the ferry that ran across the channel. The boat had also stopped at Gonria Island, which lay between Kyushu and the mainland. The island had been the site of a famous duel between two great samurai, Miyamoto Musashi and Sasaki Kojiro. The dusty tale had been tucked away in the back of his mind, half forgotten, but when he had disembarked and was actually standing on the soil there, he felt strangely elated. He had been riveted by statues of the two warriors, swords raised in mutual combat. One day, he thought, one day I'll be a real illustrator and turn sublime moments into timeless images like this. Thrilling scenes to give young readers goosebumps, take their breath away, to rise up unbidden in their memories for years to come, even as adults, and they'd talk about how great they were. He heard a disgusted laugh, and then realized it was his own voice. Trying to silence it, he appended the can of beer into his throat, but instead choked on the bubbles. He doubled over coughing, hands braced on his knees, when he heard a voice. "Kiriyama, isn't it?" He wiped his mouth and turned. There was Shiba, surrounded by several older women. Instead of the usual Tenderness uniform, he had on a casual shirt and jeans. The ladies were dressed in finer clothes. Did the guy moonlight as a host at some sort of ladies' club? Were they his patrons? Yoshiro couldn't shake the thought. Kiriyama, what are you doing here? No, I think that's my line. Are you a friend of our dear Mitsuhiko? The ladies were bubbly. Yoshiro always wondered where in the world these ladies came from. Shiba always seemed to have an entourage of at least one or two of them in tow. Was it some sort of package deal? He's a customer at the store, Shiba answered on Yoshiro's behalf. Oh, as if she had just remembered, a woman in a kimono exclaimed, "He's the egg sandwich boy, isn't he?" How did she know that? Yoshiro was at a loss for words. Watching his mouth open and shut silently, the other ladies murmured their assent. It's true. That's him. Everyone seemed to know who he was, but Yoshiro hadn't a clue as to how. As he desperately searched his memory, Shiba smiled. These are the good people who manage the dine-in space next to the store. That was it. When he looked at them carefully, he noticed the face of the woman who had reminded him of his mother. Oh, do you all work there? Thank you. I eat there all the time. Oh dear, no. Nothing like that. The woman who looked like his mother waved her hand in front of her face to dispel the idea. We all live in the Golden Villa apartments. That dining room was a social space for residents, but we opened it to the public. Yoshiro raised his eyebrows. He knew that the upper floors of the building were reserved for seniors. Right, so then it made sense that the upstairs residents were in the store all the time. The woman who looked like his mother continued. I started doing it for the sake of our dear Mitsuhiko, but you have no idea how much spice it's added to my life. The ladies all laughed, and in his sweetest voice Shiba said, I don't know how I'd survive without you, before he turned to Yoshiro. They keep it spotless in there, so the customers love it, for one thing. Just hearing that from you is thanks enough. And then on top of that, you take us to dinner. The ladies explained that Shiba had just taken them out for a fancy dinner at a local place specializing in fugu, blowfish. So Yoshiro thought idly, it wasn't that Shiba was a kept man, but still, it was somewhat of a weird relationship. Yes. But young man, you need to eat something else once in a while, don't you? It's not healthy to eat nothing but egg sandwiches and coffee. One of them admonished him, as if just remembering, and the rest of them nodded deeply in agreement. At least add a salad. Or vegetable juice, that would be fine too. They all chimed in, sounding exactly like his mother, and Yoshiro was a little embarrassed. When he ate alone, he usually just wanted to finish fast and use the time for something else, for manga, basically. But what was the point of saying that now? Well, I'd better get going, he said, and started to take his leave. I guess I should stop going to that store from now on, he thought. It'll be a shame to miss all the delicious coffee, but it's out of the way. As he turned to go, Shiba said, seems like food is always a low priority for artists. Yoshiro froze and turned back. Looking half apologetic, half embarrassed, Shiba continued. I'm a fan of your drawings, Mr. Kiriyama. The truth is, sometimes I sneak a peek at them from behind when you're working on them. As confessions go, it was a mild one, but Yoshiro felt as if his body, flushed with alcohol, had cooled instantly. He exhaled, his breath catching like a draft of cold air in the back of his throat. Shiba continued, a note of passion creeping into his voice. You have your own style, don't you? They're warm and gentle, and I think they're sweet. It's nice that you have something that you can get lost in that way, isn't it? What was this emotion? Something halfway between anger and shame forced its way up into Yoshiro's throat. He felt as if he could hear the laughter of his students echoing in his ears, loud voices barking at him, engulfing him. And beyond those voices, Shiba too was laughing. Shut up! Yoshiro screamed, waving his arms wildly in front of him, as if he were trying to scare away some creature. Shut up! Shut up! You don't know me at all, so you can't say that. He raised his voice so loud he surprised himself. The lady's eyes flew wide open, and a couple walking by cast a startled glance his way. His whole body trembling, Yoshiro opened his mouth again. I'm trying really hard to live my life, okay? I've got my own problems. Maybe it's hard for people like you to get it, but I'm killing myself here just trying. As his emotion mounted, his eyes began to water. Yoshiro bit his lip, but this had been a weakness of his since he was a kid. He whirled and fled. The dam broke and the tears he was trying to hold back flowed freely. How pathetic, he thought to himself. He was certainly old enough to know better, so what was he doing? He ran until his breath came in ragged gasps and his poorly toned legs screamed in protest. When he finally stopped, he found himself near his own apartment. Shoulders heaving, he wiped away the accumulated mix of sweat and tears. In contrast to his physical state, Yoshiro found that a strange composure had settled over him, and he dragged his exhausted form back to his apartment. In the kitchen, he drank water, lots of it. Halfway through his third glass, he took a deep breath. Cup in hand, he headed to his room. He settled himself at the black desk that had been with him since his student days and cast his eyes downwards. In front of him was a draft of the story he had been drawing until late last night. The hero, a young swordsman, his blade swinging valiantly through the air. They always make fun of me. He ran his fingers lightly over the swordsman's face. He had always loved to draw, but never knew that it could be an actual profession until third grade, when a new friend, his name was Magi, transferred to his school and taught him about artists. Magi came from Tokyo and announced he was going to be a manga illustrator when he grew up. He already owned pro-grade art supplies, a G-pen, a round pen, screen-toned sheets, and Kent paper. He knew how to use everything properly and could even draw all the heroes from the weekly issues of Jump magazine. Yoshiro had never seen drawings or tools like that before. They were the real thing. Thanks to Magi, Yoshiro too now had a dream. He might have come to it on his own, but Yoshiro imagined that it was Magi's arrival that enabled him to really go for it. Magi's presence in their shared dream loomed large in Yoshiro's mind. In high school, the two of them each started submitting work to publishers, but Magi was always the one who came closer to winning the big prizes. His finely detailed drawings had become more impressive since elementary school, and his character designs were brilliant. Before long, he'd been paired with an editor and was told he'd make his debut while he was still a student. Yoshiro was full of pride for his friend. But at some point, Magi seemed to start thinking of Yoshiro as a burden. He stopped asking him to help with inking drawings, and then he even stopped sharing his drafts. By the time Yoshiro realized he was no longer being consulted, Magi had already found engagement elsewhere as an assistant to a manga artist in Hakata. At times he would even skip school to work with the man, bowing his head in quiet apology to Yoshiro, who was perplexed by the change in his friend. We won't learn anything if we take our advice from people whose abilities or situation are too different, Magi said to him. Besides, haven't you had enough of this? You've always pushed yourself to the limit, haven't you, listening to my stories? It had been many years since Magi had moved from Tokyo to the rural town of Oita, but he spoke in clear language, free of dialect, and chose his words with care. There was no disguising the pity in his voice. Yoshiro couldn't draw the way Magi did. No matter how he practiced, he didn't seem to improve, and his work was always panned. He had managed to make it to 2 competition finals, but after that, progress was slow. He didn't have Magi's talent. There was simply no way he would ever be able to create gorgeous, stylish pictures like those splendid works of art, unless he could find a way to be reborn as someone very different from who he was then. That being the case, he had no choice but to draw his own pictures in his own way. Instead of making himself miserable over what he couldn't draw, he decided to focus on what he could draw. That's how he kept himself going, and Magi understood how he felt. Or so Yoshiro thought. There's probably something else that is, a different kind of talent that you have, right? So I think it would be wrong of me to lead you astray, down my own path. And me too. I want to be with the kind of people who can understand me on a deeper level. But you said my work was interesting, didn't you? Yoshiro said in a trembling voice. Magi always had something kind to say about Yoshiro's work. How happy it had always made him. He knew there was no way he'd find success as an artist as quickly as Magi had done. But it would be nice if Magi would at least do him the kindness of letting him help out as an assistant. No matter how desperately Yoshiro tried to find the right words, Magi just shook his head. Your skills are weak, but your personality is too strong. Besides, I can't let someone who's basically an amateur touch my work. It will hurt the quality. Yoshiro was stunned at the flat refusal, but Magi continued. You're not going to succeed in this business relying on the kindness of others. I'm serious about becoming a manga artist. This isn't a game. I'm not playing around either, Yoshiro retorted. I mean it. Yoshiro had always wanted to be a manga artist. He wanted to say so, but the words stuck in his throat and wouldn't come out. Magi burst out laughing. The laughter seemed to ooze from his mouth of its own volition. Oh, please stop, said Magi. You've made a terrible mistake. Do you understand that your actual skills are at the level of an elementary student's notebook scroll? It's a miracle that you ever made it to the finals at all. Magi laughed in Yoshiro's face for a little while longer, then shut his mouth as if he had got bored of the whole thing. Well, let's each live our lives in the fields that suit us. Then he left, and Yoshiro and Magi never spoke another word to each other. Soon after that, a manga artist from Hakata, where Magi used to go, became a popular author. His series became a regular cover feature in the magazines and was even made into an anime that was super popular with the kids. Magi might have worked for him as an assistant until his early mid-20s. For a while, Yoshiro used to recognize his touch on backgrounds and minor characters, but after a certain point those disappeared completely. He never saw Magi's pen name anywhere. What field suited him now? Yoshiro lifted a pen from the desk, but his hand wouldn't move. He had been working feverishly until yesterday, with the intention of entering the next open contest, but his passion seemed to have vanished overnight. He had been mocked, he had failed to get the results he wanted, and still, he had been utterly unable to give up manga. He had worked hard in his own way, but maybe it was time to quit. He had to rethink his life. He had the feeling that if he didn't, a day would come that was even worse than the present one. The young swordsman was looking at Yoshiro. It seemed to him that he was saying, "Sorry, pal. Maybe I shouldn't draw anymore," he thought. It was so complicated, so many things overlapping, including all those past wounds, and so painful. Maybe this was the end. The young swordsman said nothing. With a sad look on his face, head bowed slightly, Yoshiro stepped away from the desk. That night he crawled into bed without taking a bath. Yoshiro had decided it was time to go home. He'd quit his job, let the apartment go, and move home to his parents' place in Oita. The day arrived quickly, and he sent his bags ahead of him. Standing in the middle of his empty apartment, he felt like he might cry. What had he been doing here for all these years? I don't think I'll be back here again. Yoshiro began to walk, holding his small bag and putting the apartment behind him. The plan was to catch a connecting train to Oita where his parents lived, but he was finding it hard, somehow, to just up and leave, and he couldn't quite bring himself to go straight to Majiko Station. He wandered aimlessly until he found himself in front of the red brick building of the former customs house, gazing blankly at the sea. The water was beautiful, sparkling as it caught the summer sunlight, and Yoshiro squinted a little. Although the seascape was the perfect scene to lighten the heart, his spirits sank lower and lower. Going back home meant he'd be leading a boring life that wasn't very different from life here, that was for sure. Now that I've abandoned both my work and my dreams, what will I do? Found him. Suddenly a rough voice called out behind him, and when Yoshiro turned, he saw an old man astride a red cargo bike. Yoshiro had seen the man before, in the area around Majiko Station. He dressed strangely, and Yoshiro was sure he had heard students calling him Old Red. As he was thinking this, the man called out to him, "Professor. Hey, Professor. Mitsuhiko said you haven't been around lately. He's worrying about you." Who is Mitsuhiko? And more to the point, how did this old red fellow know him? Yoshiro stared back at him in surprise. "Don't go," the old man shouted. "Don't leave. Don Juan is down in the dumps because he said something rude to you, Professor." At that point, it finally dawned on Yoshiro that Mitsuhiko must be Shiba. Now that he thought about it, he had a feeling that was what those ladies down on the waterfront had been calling him, too. Since that day, he hadn't been to the Golden Villa store, or any Tenderness store, for that matter. That must be what Old Red was talking about. "But out, old man," he was about to reply, but thought better of it. After all, he was leaving anyway. Better just to be polite. He tossed the man a quick head bob, and Old Red smiled in satisfaction. His already severe face became downright menacing when he smiled, and Yoshiro was a little startled. Good. Now go make it right. Yoshiro nodded a few more times, then suddenly broke away and fled towards Majiko Station. He dashed through the ticket gate without the slightest hesitation and quickly boarded. He didn't look back, even once the train had started moving. After he left Majiko, a month passed in the blink of an eye. Yoshiro was leading a boring life at his parents' house, as he had predicted. At first, his elderly parents were overjoyed at their son's homecoming, but that quickly shifted to a litany of complaints. Isn't it about time you found some work? You know, this all happened because you're single. And so forth. He visited Hello Work, the government employment center, but he couldn't find the right job, and there wasn't much he could do about that. Things weren't great at home, so he'd go out, but there was nothing much to do within walking distance. How was he supposed to kill time in a place with nothing but mountains, rice paddies, and a few family farms? Majiko wasn't a big city, but it had at least been fairly convenient in that respect. Daily life there was free of even the most minor inconveniences, and all the pleasures of Hakata were less than an hour away by train. Tenderness Coffee was a 5-minute walk from his front door. It had become such a regular part of his life that he had taken it for granted, but he realized how lucky he had been to have that small luxury so close at hand. Particularly now, when the nearest convenience store was 25 minutes away, and that was by car. He sprawled on his bed, gazing at the ceiling. He couldn't stop wondering how this had become his future. Where and how did it all go wrong? What if I had never met Magi? If I had never had the crazy dream of being a manga illustrator? But no matter how he thought about it, the truth was he had always loved manga. I'm such a fool. As he was muttering to himself, his mother Satomi called out, "Yoshiro, are you there? I need your help. We're throwing out the old reception set in the barn." He looked out the window. An orange hue was beginning to steal across the sky. Why were they clearing out the barn at this hour? But if he asked that, Satomi's good mood would turn bad quickly. With a sigh, Yoshiro went outside. "Mom, what do you?" Scratching his head, he entered the barn. Just then, a loud voice called out, "Yep, that's the guy." He looked over. It was none other than the bearded man who was eating curry next to him, that time at the Tenderness. "Gotcha. I thought you'd be somewhere around here." The man bounded over and gave Yoshiro a few hearty slaps on the back. "I've been searching for you." "Oh, okay. What the heck?" That the man remembered him at all was strange enough, but Yoshiro couldn't for the life of him figure out what the man would want with him. "What do you mean?" asked Satomi, who was standing in front of a dilapidated full-leather sofa. "I've been searching." "For him," the man cheerfully replied. "Me, I've always been really good at treasure hunts, hide and seek. Finding things is my specialty. So I was pretty sure I could find him." The man gave a deep belly laugh. Then he turned to Satomi and started issuing instructions. "Okay, Auntie, before we do all that, let's get this into the truck." "Hold it right there." This is all happening too fast, thought Yoshiro, gingerly rubbing his back. "Mum, you know this guy." "Oh yes, he's the handyman. We call him the whatever lad. He comes around from time to time." There are a lot of seniors in the area, so it's useful to have a young man to come and do some of the heavy lifting, don't you think? You're a little too weak and not that much help, so. After this cutting remark, Satomi asked, "And you? How do you know Mr. Shiba? Are you friends?" Before Yoshiro could answer, the man gave a calm nod. "We shared some egg sandwiches." Yoshiro wanted to ask if that alone qualified them as friends, but the name that Satomi had called the man drew his attention. Shiba? He knew that name, wasn't that? But before he could ask, the man responded, "Oh, he's my brother. My younger brother, the store manager. You don't look like him." He blurted out the thought before he could stop himself. They were nothing alike, not at all. He couldn't believe that they were brothers, this disheveled, shaggy man and the other one, who seemed to have sex appeal baked into his every fiber. The man must have been used to such a reaction. He simply nodded and said, "We have the same two parents. Brothers for sure." "Yep, call me Tsugi." Before Yoshiro could respond, the man, Tsugi, apparently, carried off the sofa with his mother's help. From outside the barn came Satomi's voice, "Yoshiro, you help too." Yoshiro hurriedly picked up a small ottoman. After they had somehow managed to fit all the furniture into Tsugi's truck, Satomi pointed to a stack of cardboard boxes piled up at one end of the barn and said to Yoshiro, "Now, what about these? He also takes paper for recycling. Should we have him take these?" Yoshiro was at a loss for words. The boxes contained all of his accumulated drafts and artwork. He had intended to burn them in a corner of a field that Satomi was tending, but he hadn't been able to bring himself to do it. So instead, he had carried them out to the barn, where at least they'd be out of sight. "Seems they're too much for you to handle yourself," Satomi added. Yeah, I guess so, but..." Looking at the large cardboard boxes, Satomi said, "Even at your age, you still love don't you? It would have been nice if you could have made a living off but it didn't work out. Life is like that. Only a handful get to put rice in the pot by doing what they love." Yoshiro hung his head at his mother's sober tone. The woman knew her son well. She understood that he had sacrificed both food and sleep to his passion for manga. Her tone softened. "It's time to let it go." Yoshiro tried to nod. "You don't have to let it go." Yoshiro turned and found himself face to face with the bushy beard. Tsugi was busy guzzling an energy drink, but between gulps he managed to ask, "What if you just kept on doing it? It's just drawing, right? If you've been able to do it this long while holding down a job at the same time, I think you'll manage." But well, it's a question of talent. "Talent is being able to keep going," Tsugi said simply. "Successful people all say that. They just had to find a way to keep going, no matter what. If you can do that for long enough without reward, can't we call that talent?" Yoshiro bit his lip. Then he managed to squeeze out a few words. "But it's true. I have no talent," he said. "I'm bad at it. Really. I'll never be able to be a manga artist." "Is that so? My brother said your pictures were good. He liked them, at least. Although he can come off as a little bit of a smooth operator, somehow, so he can be hard to believe." "Oh, it was the same with you, wasn't it?" Satomi said, "At first we were all quite concerned about this peculiar young man coming around." Sugi laughed. Yes, that's right. Seems like peculiarity might run in the family, you know. If it's a family matter, your brother must be a good person, said Satomi. We all look forward to the days you come round now. All Tsugi said was, is that right? But he looked a little pleased, nonetheless. Then he turned to Yoshiro. Anyway, my brother meant what he said. But seems like he didn't get it across to you. He wanted to apologize, but it looked like you were gone for good. He was really worried, you know. He thought maybe it was his fault you disappeared. So that's why he put me on the case. I'm glad I found you. Sugi let loose a toothy grin. Then he latched onto Yoshiro's arm. Let's go for a drive. To Majiko. Sugi spoke in an offhand manner, but Majiko was close to a 3-hour drive from there, even on the expressway. Wait a minute. Yoshiro tried to demur. Let's not jump into anything we'll regret. Plus, it's already getting dark. It's no problem. I have to come back this way, so you can spend the night there, and I'll bring you back tomorrow. That should do it. Sugi looked back at the mini truck behind him. The truck bed was already full, but according to Satomi, there were other households waiting for him to visit. Sugi continued. You can stay at my brother's place. Just between us, he actually lives in the Golden Villa building on the 4th floor. He gets a discount on the rent, but it's a nice big place. So, Auntie, can I borrow your son? Yes, indeed, Satomi readily assented. I've had enough of him loafing around with that hangdog look on his face. Oh, and if you're going down to Majiko, get me some of those local sweet cakes, the ones shaped like blowfish. I like those quite a bit. Yoshiro was disconcerted by this unexpected turn of events, but Sugi had a firm grip on his arm and wouldn't let go. An hour later, Yoshiro was riding shotgun in the mini truck, speeding north on the expressway to Majiko. How did you find me? He asked, gazing at the scenery as it flowed past. Sugi gave a satisfied laugh. I told you, didn't I? Finding things is my specialty. Yeah, but it's just unbelievable. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. The Test Prep Academy had his home address, but the Shiba brothers wouldn't even have known where Yoshiro worked. As he puzzled over how in the world they could have found him, Sugi gave him a quick sideways glance, then said, Old Red. He told us that you had given up your room and were leaving Majiko. You can learn pretty much anything if you ask that man. Wow. Yoshiro remembered the man's tough, bearded face. He had always thought the guy was kind of comical, wandering around all day in his funny get-up, but now he was sounding more like some sort of intelligence agent, or a member of some shadowy organization that watched over the streets of Majiko. But even Old Red didn't know where your hometown was. And then, my brother said you were probably from Oita. Seemed like he recognized your accent. That night, when he had got so upset and shouted at Shiba, his local dialect must have come out. He hadn't noticed. My work takes me all over Kyushu. So recently I looked for you whenever I was in Oita. Aside from that tip, I've mostly been following my nose. But I found you, so that's no small thing. It's all about my animal instincts, he added, his mouth spreading into a wide grin. Observing his gruff, forthright manner, Yoshiro doubted for a moment whether this man could really be the other Shiba's brother. But then, who but Shiba's brother could have such a peculiar ability? Right then, he continued, "It's time I had a look at these drawings, too. I'm sure they're in that bag of yours." Yoshiro had a bag with a change of clothes in his lap, and sure enough, he had also packed a sketchbook with his drawings, as Tsugi had guessed. He opened the bag and pulled the book out. He ran his hand softly over its old, faded cover. When the time finally came for him to leave Majiko, Yoshiro had barely been able to stroll by the old customs house and nothing more. Since he now had the chance to visit all the places lodged in his memory, he had taken with him the volume that held the deepest sway in his heart. "This is the first sketchbook I bought after I moved to Majiko." He had purchased it at an old stationery store in the shopping district. The proprietor seemed an ill-tempered man, but after Yoshiro had made his purchase, the man had said, "There are a lot of picturesque landscapes in these parts, so make good use of it." "I grew up deep in the mountains," Yoshiro said to Tsugi, "so just being by the sea made me happy." Maybe the new surroundings would prompt a change in him, too, he thought. He could still remember the thrill he felt at the time. As he turned the pages, the scenery of Majiko unfurled before him. Children playing on the giant octopus slide at Salt Breeze Playground and the night view at Mekari Park. A sleeping cat with the Sankiro Social Club in the background, and a penguin at the Kaikyokan Aquarium. When they paused at a traffic light, Sugi paged through the book and made a sound of pleasant surprise. "I told you I'm no good," Yoshiro insisted. "No, they're not bad, are they? They have charm." He didn't know if it was Sugi's unaffected manner of speech or something about his temperament, but Yoshiro found that he accepted the compliment without resistance. "Thanks, but I'll never be a professional. My pictures don't have whatever it takes to make the cut at a commercial magazine." Magi's words came back to him, and a wave of sadness washed over him. Magi had been hard on him, certainly, but he wasn't wrong. "I don't get it," said Sugi, tilting his head in confusion. "Making it your job, or making a meal out of it, or, making the cut at a commercial magazine. Are those things that important?" "Well, aren't they?" Yoshiro raised his voice as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Isn't that the way it works? I always dreamed about drawing a manga that all the kids were crazy for, and so. Sugi broke in, "Are you saying your dream is equal to all that other stuff?" Yoshiro became still. Sugi scratched his disheveled head furiously. "Aren't things like food and work the extras that get thrown in after your dream?" His voice was so gentle it was almost like he was talking to himself, and Yoshiro could say nothing in response. Talent is," he gasped as if trying to breathe. "So listen. I'm telling you I think your pictures are good," Sugi continued. "My brother, too. To say you want to be accepted by everyone, that's not easy. But now you have at least 2 people saying you're good. Don't you need to start somewhere?" Yoshiro thought that was a little idealistic, but he could say nothing in reply. At a loss for words, he flipped through his sketchbook, page by page. He gazed, captivated, at the pictures he himself had once drawn. Yoshiro was halfway through the book when there was a loud exclamation from Tsugi, who hurriedly pulled onto the shoulder of the road and stopped the car. Yoshiro looked at him in surprise. "Eyes shining," Tsugi commanded. "Turn back a page." Yoshiro wasn't sure what he wanted, but he opened the book again and flipped to the previous page. Here. It was the scene of the duel between Miyamoto Musashi and Sasaki Kojiro. Once he saw those two bronze statues, he knew he simply had to draw them, come hell or high water. He didn't have the skill to sketch them in fine detail, so he just did it his own way. Sugi gazed happily at that picture. It's good. Really good. Is that your style? I see it. I think these two are great. Really? Musashi and Kojiro. Sugi pulled back onto the road. My old man liked them a lot. When he was in a good mood, he'd always do it for us. The duel at Gonria Island. He'd do it. Well, according to him, it was like his version of Kamishibai, the puppet shows he'd see in the streets when he was a kid. He would beat the table with some rolled-up paper and tell us the story. Kojiro waited on the shore for his nemesis. At last, Musashi appeared. He stood tall in the bow of his small boat. Kojiro shouted, "You there, Musashi? Do you fear me? Are you trembling?" Mad with impatience, Kojiro unsheathed his long blade, the hanging pole, he called it, and flung its scabbard to the sand. Musashi mocked him. If you're ready to throw away your scabbard, then you've already lost. Sugi let his voice swell into a chant, as if he were in a real drama in a theater. I'm not bad at it myself, he laughed, because I've already heard it dozens of times. And every time I adored it. Sugi pointed to the open sketchbook in Yoshiro's lap and said earnestly, "It's good, that one. It's nice and warm, and I think it's really good. You want something that children will love? How about Kamishibai? Huh, you think I should do puppet shows? Who needed a Showa-era relic like that now?" Yoshiro laughed, but at the same time his heart gave a little jump. Maybe there were other jobs out there involving pictures that children would love? Well, you could do something besides Kamishibai, I guess. Sugi's voice startled him out of his reverie. There might be something. Yoshiro replied. Could there be? He didn't know. The sea breeze came flowing through the open window of the car, and he looked outside. Majiko already. The mini truck slipped into the store car park. As Tsugi cut the engine, his brother Shiba popped eagerly out of the store. Catching sight of Yoshiro in the passenger seat, he smiled like a flower bursting into bloom. Yoshiro recoiled for an instant at this smile that seemed more appropriate for a long-lost lover than anything else. Older brother. Thank you. Pretty amazing, aren't I? I never thought you'd get him here. Shiba bowed his head deeply to Yoshiro, who was climbing awkwardly out of the passenger seat. Please forgive me for my words the other day. I spoke out of turn. Forget about it. I got fairly worked up too, didn't I? Sorry about that. As Yoshiro bowed his head in return, Shiba noticed the sketchbook in his hand and heaved a sigh of relief. Good. I was worried that you'd quit drawing on my account. No, it's fine. Sugi had wasted no time ducking into the store, leaving Yoshiro alone with his brother. Presently, he stuck his head out of the dine-in space and shouted to Yoshiro, "Hey, let's eat. I'm starving." What about me, older brother? Nope. Buy your own. Oh, that's harsh. Listening to the two of them banter, Yoshiro laughed. They may have been completely different types, but they sure sounded like brothers. Yoshiro, be quick. Coffee's getting cold, oh. The Sachika coffee. You got it. At the side entrance to the store, a banner hung down, reading new. Now selling Sachika coffee. Sole authorized vendor. Yoshiro still hadn't had a chance to try it. He had been so far away from the store. I'll be right there. Hurrying over, he entered the familiar dine-in space to find hot coffee and egg sandwiches, 2 for each of them, lined up on one of the 4 top tables. Not to mention the bright red Fukujinzuk pickles. Huh, that's a combination I know. He wanted to toast the egg sandwiches immediately, but first he just had to try the coffee. He seated himself across from Sugi and reached for the cup. It was a high-quality cup with a touch of luxury and the Sachika logo embossed in it. He traced it with his finger, then popped off the plastic lid. Yoshiro breathed in as the fragrance gently spread and made a little noise of surprise. Taste it. He turned. Shiba was standing nearby, watching him. Yoshiro turned his gaze from the manager's meaningful smile back to the coffee cup and lifted it carefully to his mouth. At the first sip, a shiver of excitement ran through him. There was a heady aroma, reminiscent of wine, and a burst of fruity acidity. A sudden, delicate flash of bitterness, then the lingering sweetness of the coffee fruit. But this is single-origin coffee, isn't it? The clean, clear taste was unmistakable. Could this really come from Sachika Coffee's master of the dark roast? It was completely different from any Sachika coffee that Yoshiro had ever tasted. He took a sip, tilted his head again, then one more sip, his eyes widening. The coffee he knew from Sachika and the coffee he was tasting now didn't match up neatly at all. He's got a really bad rap in some parts for selling out the Sachika coffee name. Shiba, who had been watching Yoshiro carefully, blurted this out, then frowned. Some of their more intense fans even picketed the store to protest. So it went that far. It was possible, thought Yoshiro. He had wondered about the public reaction himself when he had first heard about the plan. On top of that, fans of Sachiko Coffee's famously robust flavor might feel disappointed or even betrayed by the sharp acidity of the new brew. Don't overthink it, just taste it. It's amazing. The flavor really suits the sandwiches. Before he could blink, Tsugi had thrust a toasted sandwich in his direction, his face full of confidence. Yoshiro accepted the sandwich and bit into it cautiously. He chewed slowly and took a sip of the coffee. For a while, he said nothing. Then he cracked a slight smile. There's something. What is it? Although the flavor was different, there was something essential about the coffee that hadn't changed. The fragrance of the bread and the sweetness of the egg filling came through perfectly, and the presence of the coffee wasn't diminished in the slightest. How? It's delicious. It was a new flavor. How is this possible? Originally, it was the higher-ups at the Tenderness chain who had requested a custom single-origin coffee, Shiba said. Apparently, the master at Sachika Coffee thanked them for the request. He said that he was grateful to take on a new challenge at his age, while still doing what he loved. And that if they were going to do it, they should search out a flavor that would be loved by one and all. Yoshiro peered at the cup in his hand. The master was already a stooped old man. He had grown weaker, too. The last time Yoshiro visited the shop, he had mentioned with a shrug of the shoulders that his hospital visits had been increasing of late. They had persuaded that man to take on a venture like this? The average number of customers here at the Tenderness is at least 800 per day. Of those, about 150 buy coffee. When you consider how many branches altogether there are in the chain, this makes for a vast number of people. Personally, I wondered if it was possible that a single flavor could satisfy all of them. Still, it's become very popular. It has its critics, but sales have been excellent. Yoshiro took a bite of the sandwich and drank his coffee. A feeling that could only be described as passion was building inside him. Even that old man was happy to take on a new challenge. And he got results. "It's amazing," said Shiba. "I hear he's planning to carry a selection of the best single-origin coffees at his own shop. He's now on a trip to source the beans." That's pretty cool, isn't it? The cup in Yoshiro's hand was empty. As he looked at it, he found himself starting to despair again. Could he ever have got that far in life? Would he ever express in his own work just a small fraction of the artistry that he had just now tasted? Unable to do even that, he had left everything in his life a half-baked mess. But despite that, hadn't he been hurt enough? He removed the sketchbook from his bag. Yoshiro gazed at the old volume for a while, then called out to the store manager. Shiba had changed out of his work uniform and was happily munching on some pickled taquan radishes that Satomi had given to Tsugi before they left. In one hand was a can of beer. That was fast. "Excuse me, Mr. Shiba?" "And Tsugi too. My pictures. You really think they're good?" "Of course." Shiba nodded. "I only managed to steal a quick glance now and then from behind you, so my opinion doesn't count for much, but I would never make such a hurtful joke. I always thought they were good." "Oh," Mitsu interrupted Tsugi. "Did you see that one? There's one that's real good. Yoshiro, show him." Yoshiro opened his sketchbook as requested. The samurai sketch of Musashi and Kojiro made Shiba instantly happy, just like his brother. Wow, the Kamishibai that Dad used to talk about must have been just like this, you know. I thought so too. Their faces lit up as they looked at the picture that Yoshiro had made. A smile rose of its own accord on his face. The whole reason he wanted to draw in the first place, he recalled, was to see faces like these. He wanted to draw pictures that would make people really feel something. Maybe it didn't have to be kids' comics, after all. Maybe I should keep on drawing. The quiet remark didn't elude either of the brothers. Although they didn't resemble each other at all, a single look passed between them as they said in unison, "Sounds good." "Now then, shall we go somewhere for a drink?" asked Shiba. "Kiriyama, I owe you an apology, so it's my treat." "Personally, I could really go for some fugu," interjected Tsugi. "I'm talking to Kiriyama. Big brother, you can pay for yourself." Together with the two peculiar brothers, he walked out into the town of Moji at nightfall. A cool sea breeze flowed gently by. As they immersed themselves in the familiar but beautifully illuminated cityscape, Yoshiro laughed out loud for the first time in a long while. Looking back, he could see the bright lights of Tenderness casting off into the darkness. Their coffee gave him courage, that was certain. If he needed courage in the future, wherever he was, he could always visit Tenderness. Feeling just a little bit happy, He gave a slight bow to the banner fluttering in the wind.